Hello and welcome to some incredibly chaotic sewing adventures. Today I'm gonna try and do a tutorial for that crop hoodie, you know, the filler one. I did a very awful sketch. That's what it's gonna look like, probably. I don't know, I'm gonna try and teach people how to make it, so let's get into that, I guess. Sewing! Yay! I have one full-sized hoodie that I will use to cut pieces from. So the first thing that I do is I unpick this elasticy bit at the bottom, just because that makes it easier to do everything else that I do. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just unpicking this bottom elastic piece, as I was originally going to use it for the finished part of the hoodie. I was going to attach it to the bottom along the diagonal to make it look really nice and neat, but I tried pinning it together and it actually looked really bad, so I decided not to do it. So you can just skip this step unless you want to keep that piece for yourself and do what I tried to do. Otherwise, this is just an unnecessary step that you don't have to do. Okay, now that that's unpicked, you're gonna work out the angle that you want it to sit on so that you can get it nicely sitting on yourself. So what I do is I would use pins, just some little pins, and just kind of adjust it across and then put it up against myself to see that it's sitting in the right place that I want it. What I did next is just pinned along the top layer of this pink fabric to get the right angle and length for the hoodie. Then I tested it up against myself to make sure it was all correct and sitting the way I wanted it to. I already had this white piece cut out of a different hoodie that I'd done, so I use this as a reference, but using a ruler or a piece of measuring tape and doing the same pin technique, I guess, along it would work the same. I use pins because it's easier to adjust when you're holding it up against yourself, and I think it's a lot easier than erasing chalk or a pencil mark from the hoodie. And then I leave a bit of a gap next to the hood where I'm cutting it, just because that's a lot easier to sew it all together. Okay, so now that that's pinned, there's a couple other things I need to do before I cut it. So what I do is unpick this seam, unpick the seam at the back of this sleeve, this seam behind the hood, and then this part of the shoulder seam. With this particular unpicking that I did here, what I ended up doing later in this was I unpicked that full sleeve and the full hood piece as well, because I'd only done half here, and so when I sewed it together it just was not working. The pieces don't match up. I was basically trying to Frankenstein this hoodie together and it just was not sitting flat, so unpicking those helped a lot more. And I also unpicked the rest of the shoulder seam. Doing this makes it a lot easier to sew it together. Now what you're going to do is just cut it along the weird little pins that you have. Okay, now I'm going to make the other piece that I want to, which will pretty much just be like a little diagonal cut like that. Because I already have this piece cut out in white, I will use this as my little reference. You should have two of these triangle back pieces and two of these. Okay, day whatever of making this, I think I figured out the best approach is to unpick the hood from it and this side of the sleeve and leave this sleeve on would be a lot better. So I will show you that on the other piece that I will be doing instead of this one, because I have messed up. I should have left the sleeve on this side because it's not important at all. And now I'm going to sew this together and see how we go. Okay, so since this other hoodie that I'm making, these pieces are still all intact. What I'm going to do is unpick this sleeve and the hood, and then sew them together like that. Okay, I'm at my sewing machine and I'm going to attempt to sew these pieces of fabric together and hope that it works. Yep. On another hoodie piece I made right after this, I decided it would be a lot easier to hem the hoodie pieces first, and then sew the two front pieces together on the diagonal before attaching everything together, because that makes it sit a lot nicer and doesn't have weird little puffy bits. So I would suggest doing that as well. Hello. So this hoodie is complete. All I'm going to do now is just iron the seams because they're not sitting flat, and ironing them should fix that, I'm hoping. Should do it. But yeah. I also have the other hoodie finished. It looks exactly like this, but this is white and this is pink. With that one, I think I'm gonna fix up the front of it because the hood sits a little bit to the left and I would like it to be perfectly centered. By a little bit to the left, I mean very noticeably to the left, and it looks a little bit odd, but oh well. What I think I would do if I made it again is I would sew these two pieces together before sewing the whole thing together, which I probably should have done in the first place, but I think I was just lazy, and I definitely shouldn't have skipped over that, and I don't know why I did. It would have just been easier. I would also suggest maybe hemming the front pieces as well, though that's not like an incredibly difficult thing to do once it's already sewn, well, once it's fully sewn together. And then that would also make this side a bit smoother because mine has like a little bit that sticks up because these two pieces weren't sewn together beforehand. But that's okay because I'm going to have like a black strip going down the sides to make it cool and stuff. And it's, yeah, so this is what it is. I think it turned out pretty well. It turned out really nice. I think it was pretty easy. I just took a hot minute to figure out what the hell I was doing. So hopefully this helped you, and if you make it from this, let me know. I would love to see how it goes. If you have any questions, message me and I'll try my best to reply. I hope this is actually helpful and that people enjoyed watching it. And I hope you enjoyed watching this whole thing, this weird process that I created. I don't know. I'll also try and upload a couple of pictures to Instagram, doing like a little tutorial that way as well in the next one that I'm going to make, so that it's a little more straightforward instead of all over the place, me figuring out what the hell I'm doing. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in another video.